Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Allplane Podcast this year, 2021. Like I guess everyone else, I'm wishing that this year is going to be better for the aviation industry, which is not a particularly ambitious goal considering how last year went. But in any case, we are here to talk with entrepreneurs and innovators that are working on a much longer time scale, working day and night to redefine the future of the industry for decades to come. But first of all, let me reiterate my invitation to visit our website, Allplane.tv, that is Allplane.tv. There you will find more episodes and other content and stories about aviation. In this podcast, we have talked with a number of entrepreneurs that are developing new technologies and aircraft concepts to make aviation more sustainable. But I also wanted to get the point of view of an operator, of an airline, and not just any airline. Aaron Shaw is the founder and CEO of Sydney Seaplanes, the largest seaplane operator in Australia. Did I say that I find seaplanes really fascinating? For example, now that we are at it, I recommend that you check the podcast that we did with Florida-based seaplane entrepreneur Rob Ceravolo, the founder of Tropic Ocean Airways. You will like it. But in any case, what I wanted to say is that Sydney Seaplanes, Aaron Shaw's airline, has a very specific project to become the world's first fossil-free airline. So in today's episode, Aaron is going to tell us how they plan to do it, and he also shares a story of Sydney Seaplanes and how he's currently working to bring seaplanes into new territories and markets. So without further ado, let me welcome Aaron to the podcast. Hello, Aaron. How are you?
Hi, Miguel. I'm well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for making time from the other side of the world, because we have today a 10-hour time difference.
Yep.
You're joining us from Sydney in Australia.
It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah.
I'm based in Europe, so that's a considerable time difference, but I'm glad that we managed to find some time.
Yes.
Some time overlap so that we could.
It's quite early for you, isn't it? 9. Oh,
yeah.
What is it? 9.
Starting the day. Yeah.
No, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically I got in touch with you recently when I learned about a very interesting project that you are leading there in Australia. You are the founder and CEO of Sydney Seaplanes, a seaplane operator based in the city of the same name, obviously. And you recently unveiled a project we can cover in more detail later in the conversation, to electrify part of your fleet and to launch a regular service using all electric seaplanes between Sydney and Canberra. But first of all, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit about what is Sydney Seaplanes and how you founded this company and how you basically developed into what it is now.
Sure. So as you said, I'm the managing director and founder of Sydney Seaplanes. We've been the company's been in operation since 2005, so we're coming up to 15 or 16 years now. I've always worked in aviation my whole life. I'm a commercial pilot. I do have a seaplane rating. Sadly, I don't fly that much these days, but I've always been sort of attracted to seaplanes because they represent a great mix of aviation and tourism, which is sort of a leisure product, which are two of the areas I've worked mostly in my whole career. So it's a nice combination of a sort of a technical element, which is the aviation side, as well as the fun side of showing visitors to Sydney and locals for that matter, the great sights of this beautiful city. I mean, it's a famous harbour, one of the most beautiful harbours in the world. We've got the famous landmarks of the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge there. We fly over those on every one of our flights, every single one. So it's a joy really to be able to get in the air, be so close to the centre of the city, and that's one of the great benefits of seaplanes.
Do you operate from the harbour of Sydney? So from Botany, is it called Botany Bay?
Botany Bay is not actually Sydney Harbour. Botany Bay is the next sort of bay south of Sydney Harbour. That was
Okay.
the bay that James Cook actually sailed into in 1788. But, they went past Sydney Harbour because they thought it looked a little bit tight and small, but in fact, it's not. Once you go through the heads, it opens up to being a huge, beautiful harbour. So Rose Bay, we actually operate from Rose Bay in Sydney Harbour, which is the biggest bay within the harbour. And really interestingly was the original flying boat base back in the 1930s. So Sydney's, or Australia's, in fact, first international airport was based at Rose Bay with Qantas flying boat services, which originated in Rose Bay and flew all the way to the United Kingdom. So that was the original kangaroo route that began from the exact same site that we operate from to this day, some 90 or 80 years later.
So this is downtown.
Yeah, it's what would you say? It's a 10-minute ferry ride from right downtown, right? So very close to the centre of Sydney. Yes.
Yeah, I need to refresh my Australian geography, and hopefully one day go and see it for myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you operate these seaplanes out of Sydney, but are you mainly a charter operator, or do you also have some regular service?
We are currently a charter operator. We have operated scheduled services in the past. Just to give you a bit more geographical information, the next city north of Sydney is called Newcastle. That's the second biggest city in the state of New South Wales. And we have in the past operated scheduled services from Sydney Harbour to Newcastle Harbour, which is a 30-minute flight, as opposed to a sort of 3-hour drive, right? So that was quite a popular service. But in fact, at one point we were doing 8 flights a day. But in those days, we were it was fairly early on in our experience of operating seaplanes, and we were doing that service VFR, visual flight rules, right? So it was quite susceptible to bad weather. And when you're operating transport service or scheduled flight as opposed to tourism and leisure flights, it's a different dynamic, right? Because people are traveling to get between A and B. They're not traveling to go to lunch at a beautiful resort, or, they want to go whether the weather's bad or not. And we'll get onto this later, I'm sure, but we made a decision back then to focus primarily on tourism and leisure flights and let that scheduled service go. We are going to resurrect those services, but do them differently and learn from the mistakes of first time around.
So this new route you're planning now to Canberra, that would be getting back into scheduled services. And you have chosen to go all electric for that route. So you're planning to retrofit one of the Cessna caravans that you have.
That's right.
And then operate this regular service. Tell us more about this. How this idea came about, and what is the time frame for this? Where are you now with this whole thing?
It's early days, Miguel. It's early days for now, although we've been able to focus on it quite a lot in the last few months, given the COVID slowdown of normal business activities. It allows you to spend a bit more time on business planning for things like this. You're in Barcelona. Interestingly, we've teamed up with a trilateral arrangement with this electrifying our fleet, and our engineering partner is a company called Dante Aeronautical, who are Spanish, based in Madrid originally, but they have an Australian presence as well. So we got together, I got together with their representative here. We're both really interested in, and passionate about electric engines in aviation. And we have put together a sort of a program where we've been working with Magni-X, who are quite a well-known electric engine manufacturer, certifier. They're actually originally from Australia, but they're now headquartered and based in Seattle, in the United States. So our trilateral arrangement with that company and Dante Aeronautical is to certify the Magni-X engine on a Caravan airframe. Okay, so retrofit is the right word of saying that. So that we go through the certification process with CASA, which is Civil Aviation Safety Authority of Australia, to certify the Magni X engine on the Caravan airframe. And then we plan to operate that in all of our caravans, on all of our flights, including the tourism and leisure services. But we'll also introduce next year scheduled services, reintroduce scheduled services. Canberra is one of them, and we've done a demonstration flight to the lake in the middle of Canberra only last month.
I was about to ask because Canberra is in the interior, right? So I guess you need a pretty big lake there to be able to land and take off.
Canberra is the capital city of Australia. It's inland from Sydney. It's about a 3.5-hour drive, 4-hour drive from Sydney. So, but it's built around a lake. It's a man-made lake. It's a dammed river that's created quite a large lake in the middle of the city. It's quite pretty. It's a beautiful lake, actually. And the great benefit from a customer or a passenger's point of view is that we can, of this service that we're proposing, which is departing Sydney Harbour and landing in Lake Burley-Griffin in Canberra, as a passenger can avoid the traditional airport environment, the hassle of that we all know what that represents, the queues and taxis and all the rest of it, ATC delays and you name it, and go straight from the centre of Canberra and land very, very close to the centre of Sydney. Mm-hmm. So we'll be by far the fastest possible way of getting between the centre of both cities.
What competition would you have then? Are there regular flights on let's say, traditional jet aircraft?
Certainly. Yeah, there certainly are. So Qantas is, of course, the major airline in Australia, and they do fly regularly between Sydney and Canberra, but airport to airport, right? So that really is, and I've done it a few times, really is almost the same amount of time as driving. By the time you get to the airport, you have to be there an hour before your flight. You've got all the hassles and queues and so on. I mean, it's not so bad now, right? Because aviation's on its knees and airports are pretty quiet. But in normal times, then it's a 3 or 3.5 hour journey, whether you drive or fly, by the time you get through all the airport hassle at either end. So yes, there are traditional services there, but I think I see the benefit of ours being avoiding all of the hassle, and it's a much faster and more enjoyable service.
How fast is it going to be?
It's an hour.
An hour door to door, or 1 hour in the air?
An hour from Harbour to landing in Lake Burley-Griffin. Now, okay. Lake Burley-Griffin is really quite literally in the middle of the city, so you know it's 5 minutes to Parliament buildings, mm-hmm. you know, like to the centre of the government from where we're landing. You've got some commerce in Canberra as well, again 5 minutes from the wharf where we would land. So you really are landing in the heart of the city there.
How many passengers on each aircraft?
So we're actually proposing to operate that service in a twin otter rather than a caravan. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And one of them is that a lot of government traffic customers are required to fly in twin engine aircraft. And given that the flight is inland, which the additional safety element of having 2 engines and 2 pilots on the flight, which is what we would do. And also the Twin Otter being a larger aircraft and heavier than the caravan, it will allow us to operate in stronger wind conditions. Certainly gives significant advantages on really windy days where the harbour particularly gets choppy, right? And we have to cancel services in the caravan, but we could continue up to a point, of course, with the Twin Otter. I've done some analysis on that. We believe the Twin Otter can take probably 35 knots of wind, whereas the caravan is 30 knots that we stop flying. A significant increase in reliability of water-to-water services. They amphibious as well. So worst case scenario, we can also operate an airport to airport service. If it's just the harbour or the lake is just too rough to land on, we've still got that as an option.
So I guess being a lake, is it more reliable as a landing place?
It
than
is.
the harbour?
It is more reliable, and the great thing as well is it's fresh water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got that. We don't have the constant corrosive element of the saltwater environment that we have in the harbour. Every other landing and takeoff is going to be in a beautiful freshwater environment to flush all that salt water off the plane. Mm-hmm. So actually, it's quite a good option. Yeah, it's not without its challenges, that's for sure. I mean, lakes have other elements. Canberra is about 1,800 feet above sea level, okay, and very hot in summer. So you've got quite a high density altitude considerations to deal with on environments like that. But again, that's why performance of the twin otter is a benefit to that particular location as opposed to a caravan. Yeah, I had the chance to have here on the podcast a seaplane entrepreneur from the US, from Florida, Rob Serabolo of Tropic Ocean Airways. And we had this conversation, and I realized, let's say, what are the challenges of maintenance when you're operating on seawater? I mean, it's amazing how much maintenance has to go into preventing all this corrosion from the salty water. It's a war. It's a war that we fight every single day with this corrosion. And also the challenges of the surface, the type of surface that you need to operate the seaplanes, because I also was unaware of the challenges of having the perfect conditions and how sensitive seaplanes can be to a little bit of wind or We've done quite a lot of consulting in different parts of the world, including in Bahamas, but also up in the Philippines and Vietnam and a number of places in Asia. And often people think, well, a seaplane, it can land on the sea, right? It could be anything, but actually no. It needs to be a very flat, protected water environment. And I can imagine in the Caribbean, where they have a lot of open water environments, which really would be quite tricky on a number of different occasions. We're quite lucky that we are really just sticking to harbours and lakes, which are always sheltered, right? So the water has to, the wind conditions have to be really quite strong before the surface of the water is not suitable for seaplanes to operate on. You mentioned consulting, and that's something actually I wanted to ask you about, because you, as a veteran of the seaplane business, my understanding is that you are providing consultancy services to other entrepreneurs around the world that want to start their seaplane operations. Is it right? That is right, Miguel. Yeah, we've actually done a lot of that over the last 5 years and worked all over the world, helping different companies or individuals, in some cases, start their own seaplane services. Absolutely. We started in 2014 with a company in Vietnam called Aviation, who were a part of a tourism group there. And they wanted to begin seaplane services from Hanoi Airport to Halong Bay, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a beautiful, amazing natural location and perfect for seaplanes because it's a very sheltered waterway. So we consulted. I was actually back and forth to Vietnam many times that year, helping start that service, and it's still going today. And no doubt it's taken hundreds of thousands of people between Hanoi and Halong Bay already, and really does provide an absolutely stunning viewpoint of the bay that was otherwise not available to people. So that's one. We've worked in Indonesia, we've worked in the Philippines, we worked in China. We did an audit for a company that was looking to start seaplane services in China. I mentioned we worked in Miami, New Zealand. We helped Auckland Seaplanes start their Beaver service. So yeah, that's been quite a really fun and rewarding sort of side business that wasn't really something that we looked for. It's something that found us, and it's been really, really enjoyable. And back to the electric aircraft thing. What is the time frame for all this certification and flights? You mentioned next year, so we're talking about 2022
for?
Well, we're going to start this year, right?
Okay.
We're going to start this 2021, right? Is the plan. We'll begin the certification process, and we're expecting that will take 2 years, and that's been our based on our initial discussions with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority here on the certification process. Because there's many considerations, right, before you get to the point of actually certifying that that's a safe option for that aeroplane.
So we are looking at 2 years until the time when the service is inaugurated. You start flying.
No, so we'll start the service with normal turbine engines, whether it be on the Caravan or the Twin Otter. Right, so it's kind of got two elements to what we're proposing here. One is the service itself and the benefits of the aviation service as a standalone thing, which is the time saving and the convenience of getting close and kind of leveraging our center of city location more than we're doing now.
Conventional propulsion. Yeah.
Conventional propulsion, right?
Yeah.
And
but what
then
about
once the certification's done, we'll roll that into it after.
Actually, what I was asking specifically, sorry, I didn't make it clear. When do you expect the all-electric flights to be launched?
So we would expect the first all-electric service will be launched at the beginning of 2023.
Okay, right? I see.
So that's our expectation and desire, that would be realistic. And we've got some, one of the good things of our company is we've got quite a few short flights that we offer. 10, 15-minute flights. And we've got to be realistic and are realistic about where battery technology is now and the weight of the batteries and so on in terms of the weight versus range equation, right? So how commercially viable that is for operators. But we're in a good position that we've got a couple of flights and services and routes that will be very short. Right, but they'll be ideal ones to start the service with. The battery technology doesn't allow a flight of an hour, let's say. Right, we could still commercially viably operate some of our flights with batteries that provide half-hour range, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah, actually, I was to ask you about this because you mentioned the flight to Canberra is about 1 hour. That's quite long for current battery power flights, right? Especially when you are talking about how many passengers per flight.
So we with the conventional propulsion, we're expecting 15 passengers on the Twin Otter. Okay. Now you're exactly right. An hour is a long flight time with batteries as they are, which is why we're also looking at hydrogen fuel cell technology as well. Okay, because that would appear to me to be a bridge or a stepping stone, or perhaps a permanent way of introducing nil emission electric aviation in a commercially viable way, because the battery weight and technology that's around now is really limiting on the number of passengers that you can carry. And it's limiting to the extent that it's probably not commercially viable to go all battery for 90% of potential operators now, right? You need to provide like a hybrid solution or an interim solution that, and it seems to me that hydrogen may well be that option that does make it commercially viable.
Yeah, actually, I had on the podcast a few weeks ago a representative of Zero Avia, which is the company is developing a powertrain.
They are. We know them well. Yes, absolutely. Certainly, that is a company that we're looking at closely as well. And they're making some great inroads. They've done some amazing stuff in terms of fundraising and partnerships with the likes of British Airways and so on. Recent announcements. So exciting times. That's an exciting company, and certainly one that's on our radar that we may be able to work with here with our project in this part of the world.
So shall we say that let's say the powertrain choice is not settled yet? It's something you're still working on.
We are still working on that, but I think realistically, hydrogen's going to have to be involved to make this a commercially viable solution. and for some time. I mean, I'm not an expert. This is early days for me in this journey as well. I must say, right? There's people who know a lot more about the technical side of it than I do. However, what I do know is that the batteries as they are now, the weight versus range scenario is very limiting, and there's plenty of people that are working, very talented organizations and scientists and people working on getting more energy into batteries for the same weight, and I'm sure that will happen. But the question is when and how long will that take before we're getting that to be a commercially viable scenario where we just need batteries and nothing else.
But you definitely you aim to be first to launch a scheduled service.
We're launching some of our routes in 2023 nil emission, fully nil emission. Then I reckon we're a chance of being first. And it's Australians we're sitting on the bottom of the world, but we always like to punch above our weight, right? So we want to get in the race, right? And see who can be. And so definitely one of our goals and ambitions is to push this safely, going through all the processes that need to be gone through, of course.
What type of short flights would you be able to offer in 2023? Is it going to be like panoramic flights around Sydney?
Yeah, that's an example. One of our most popular flights for tourism, when we had tourists in Australia, which we don't at the moment, but we're hoping they'll come back at some point, is a 15-minute flight over Sydney Harbour. Okay. And we started this conversation today talking about the beautiful harbour that it is. And so in that time frame, you get to see all those beautiful, world-famous icons and beaches and the Opera House and so on. And it's 15 minutes. So that is a flight which is viable now. There's another destination as well, which is just a 10-minute flight north of Sydney Harbour. It's a place called Palm Beach. It's a beautiful sort of enclave, if you like, a little bit like Hamptons to New York or Malibu to Los Angeles, that type of scenario where we can fly there in 10 minutes, right, as opposed to a pretty significant drive for people. So that's another route that we're looking at introducing all electric onto, and we think that all electric nil emission aviation will be really popular to the demographic that lives in those areas as well.
And this would be battery powered.
It could be all battery. It could be
with
that stage, right? It could be
with the
any caravan.
Yeah.
Right.
How many people on the caravan
So we're currently carrying 10 in the caravan. Yeah, right. So I mean, whether we start that service and we can carry 8 or 7 or something like that's a possibility. But we'd still do it if that were the case. We would still do that because we want to invest.
Though, because most of the all electric airplanes so far that I've seen are mostly like 1-2 people on board.
True.
That's one step up.
That's right. That's right. But it's getting better every day. And those the 1s and 2s, you're looking at flights where they're looking at the 1 hour range stuff, which is a half-hour flight plus half-hour reserve, right? Yeah. So we're looking at less than that for these flights. And that's why we believe by the time that the certification of the engine on that airframe is done, we will hopefully have a battery that will give us something like 6 to 8 people range right, on a flight of that distance or time, if you like. Now, that might be optimistic, don't know, but that's why we're looking at other things as part of this process, i.e. the hydrogen cell hybrid technology as well. Absolutely critical to this whole process.
Yeah, it's interesting how it seems to be the seaplane segment of the industry. It has very ambitious goals. There's also this other seaplane operator in the west coast of Canada that also has plans to do all electric.
Harbour Air. I mean, I massively admire that company. I really do. They're an incredible company, and really great admiration for them and what they're doing for many years now. And you're right, but look, maybe it's because seaplanes, and it's not just us, but we certainly are this. We operate in these pristine environments, and we exist because of these pristine environments. People come here to see them, to use our services, to fly with them. So we're really vested in the environment. We're totally vested in a sustainable environment or operation and minimizing our impact on the environments that we operate to and from. So that's probably the unique thing about seaplanes and aviation is that part of it. And that's maybe why you're seeing significant, I suppose, interest from our sector in this technology.
Mm-hmm. People that want to learn more about your company and this project, where should they go? The website, other channels where they can find out?
Well, the website is a good place to start, seaplanes.com.au. It's pretty easy. It's Google Sydney Seaplanes, or pretty easy URL to remember. LinkedIn's another one. We've got a nice Sydney Seaplanes page on LinkedIn, which we keep updated with, I suppose, more of the sort of professional endeavor stuff, is updated there regularly. I've also got my own profile on LinkedIn as well. So those are the areas I'd say that we'll probably post more regular updates about this part of our business as we progress through the certification.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, Aaron, it's been great having you here today on the podcast. I'm very jealous of this summer setting you are in now. I can see you as we speak now. And, we are.
Well, it's still light here, and it's almost 8 o'clock at night. So it's a great time of year, right?
It's a really cold day here, so I really jealous seeing that you are right in the middle of the summer now, enjoying the.
Well, you know what, Miguel, I hope so much. This time next year, you'll be able to come to Australia freely, with no quarantine, none of any of that stuff, and you can come with us. Please do.
Yeah, I think we all hope so. Okay, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Before you go, and if you like this podcast, a quick reminder that it would be absolutely great if you could please give it a rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you're using, or recommend it to a friend or whomever might be interested. Thank you very much, and see you soon.